What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cat and Cloud podcast. Chris Baca here. I'm running solo today just to paint a picture of what's going on. I'm in the office in real time next to the roastery. We've got a cupping going on behind me. We've got espresso training going on in the corner. We've got a bunch of admin stuff going on at the table. It is very alive. It's really exciting to be recording in here. This is awesome. We've reached out on Instagram, on the website for questions for the podcast, and we're building a big bank of them. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted. We've got them logged, and we're going to take them as they come. So today I've bucketed 3 that fit cleanly under this workplace culture description, and we're just going to attack those, talk about it. So if you wrote in and you didn't hear your question today, don't even trip. We got you covered. We got a whole list. So with that, let's just get into it. Oh, there's Chuck. Did the call work out? Oh, great. I ditched a financial call to be with you guys here right now. Number 1, what are the top 3 things you would do to build a culture at a company or organization? So we get cultural questions quite a bit. And the way I think about it isn't in terms of top 3. There's just this kind of big foundational piece to the whole situation, which is starting with a mission and a set of values. So mission would essentially be the purpose for your organization to exist. And that can be, but doesn't have to be, directly connected to the product that you make. So our mission at Cat and Cloud is to inspire connection by creating memorable experiences. And coffee is, of course, our primary product, but coffee is a conduit for connection. It's a vehicle for exploring that mission. So it's really easy to default to a mission that is, completely in alignment with your product. Let's say, our goal is to provide the best coffee on earth, or the best whatever you do on earth. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to create an amazing product, but it's not really a differentiator, and it doesn't give people as much to sink their teeth into as you might think. Because anybody who's making a thing, it almost goes without saying, it's almost just cost of being in the game that you want to do a really good job at that. So saying, I make guitars, I want to make really good guitars, or I'm an automobile manufacturer, we make really nice cars. It's, I don't want to say it's saying nothing, but you're kind of saying nothing. What is the purpose of making these things? What will these things do to enhance the lives of the people that choose to engage with these things? So having that strong foundational mission is one. It's like this North Star. And then the second piece to building a great culture is having a set of values that will guide your decisions when you're on this journey. So you've got this North Star and a mission, and then these values, which are essentially, you can think of it as an algorithm or a framework or a gut check to run through. If you're making any kind of tricky decisions, does it align with your company's value structure? So we have 5 values that we filter everything through, and that is, everything from the guest experience, how we treat the people that come through our doors, how we treat our employees, how we're making decisions for the business. There's no slice of the business that is exempt from the value structure and exempt from the mission. And those are in my mind, those are really the 2 key anchors. And the tricky part about them is it's really easy to ignore them, especially if you're having some success. It's really easy to trick yourself into, I can make a destructive decision with a short-term upside that doesn't really align with the values because there's a little win in it, and we all need to make money, and we all need to go forward, and I can rationalize it that it's going to be good for some of my employees, and especially going to be good for my pocketbook. But usually 95% of the time, those things come back to bite you. So setting up that framework for sure. And then knowing, values in business aren't so different than values in our personal life, which is when we are feeling our best, we're generally operating within those values, but also knowing that we're never going to be perfect. Organizations make mistakes just as People make mistakes. So hold them tightly, give yourself grace to maneuver through them. So once you have those things, then you have to operationalize them. So if I was going to pick the top three things that you do to build a company or a culture, number one, starting with a mission and a set of values that feel true to you. Second, developing a consistent feedback loop, both positive and constructive, that's built off of those values. So we're on, I'd say, the bigger size of a small company, but a lot of people in the specialty coffee industry run, single shops or small roasteries, and it's really common in small business to ignore some of the structured things like giving good, consistent feedback. And what we see happen over time is if you ignore feedback, and I understand why you would ignore feedback. I don't love giving feedback either, because if you haven't practiced doing it a lot, it can feel very, very uncomfortable. It's a skill just like anything else. And if you don't have any reps with it, yeah, it can be scary. But the more you get comfortable with it, the more reps you get in, the easier it is. And then you see the positives for it, which is, let me back that out a little bit. A lot of people have really poor workplace culture experiences. So it's easy to see feedback as your boss simply dropping the hammer on you, telling you exactly what you did wrong. Because if you're like me, that's probably happened to you a number of times. But really all feedback is, it's a consistent realignment with the mission and the values. And of course, you'll have feedback on skill-based things as well. We've got this mission and values. We also have to teach people how to roast coffee. We also have to teach people how to give amazing guest service, how to make espresso, all of these things in service of this mission. So within that, there's all of these touch points, areas of improvement. So you can just think of values as continued cultural alignment. So every training you have, every SOP you have, every checklist you have, some things are black and white, but everything should be able to be traced back to the mission, so that when you're giving feedback, it's not personal in the sense that I have a problem with you or there's a problem with what you're doing. It's basically, here's how what you're doing does or does not align with and contribute to our culture. And it's much easier to give feedback when it's not a personal attack, which it never should be. We're critiquing the work, not the worker, and that in a both positive and negative sense. So getting those reps in to provide regular ongoing feedback. All of our leadership, everyone in upper leadership has one-on-ones with our team every week. We have a weekly meeting with our upper leadership team. We've got weekly meetings with our direct reports. And even as soon as orientation, which every new hire goes through before they ever step on the floor, one of the things we talk about is, hey, we give a lot of feedback here. You'll probably get more feedback here than you've got at any other job that you've ever had. And feedback is not an indication that you're doing something wrong. It's just an opportunity for learning and for growth. So recapping the top two, starting with strong sense of mission and values, a consistent feedback loop for both positive and constructive feedback. And, again, I'm not a big top three guy, but if I had to pick three, I would say the third key is something like giving your team members some sort of empowerment that is proportional to the position held. So one of the things that, one of the things I've always craved at work is some sense of autonomy. And this is a strange dance with autonomy, because at the most basic level, if you're going to do well somewhere, you need to have you need to have a strong cultural alignment. You need to be invested in the beliefs of that organization. And if you're not, it's probably not a good fit for you. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the organization. It just means that it's not a good fit. And certain jobs and certain organizations are better fits for certain people. So assuming that's happening, and I've been fortunate enough to where I've had really amazing work experiences as a whole. So once the cultural alignment is there, the thing that I'd crave the most is some form of autonomy. Is my voice heard in some way? Is my showing up making a difference? Can I sprinkle in some of my ideas? And the magic of doing it in a way that makes sense is, as an employee, you really have to pay into the bank of the company to see the return on your ideas. And what I mean by that is, at the most basic frontline level, if you come in, just got through orientation, you're a new employee, you're not proven, you don't really know the business well at all, it's not surprising that you might have, 5 or 10 ideas that aren't going to be implemented. There's just not that level of trust built. And you're participating in the business in a different way than someone who's been here for, let's say, 7 or 8 years. So if I take someone who's brand new versus someone like Mark, who's the director of our wholesale partner program, he has the opportunity to implement lots of his ideas. And again, those ideas have to be in line with the company framework, and we definitely have initiatives for him as well. But over time, he's been able to build a certain level of trust. He's developed and displayed a certain amount of expertise. He's got a track record that lets us know that we can trust a bunch of his ideas. And that's a beautiful thing. So there are small versions of that at every level. An example on the front line for us is we have something that we run through every time a guest comes in the store called the 7 steps of service. So the 7 steps of service is basically 7 things that happen every time someone comes in, starting with a reach out. Something like the 2-step rule. If someone gets 2 steps into the cafe, they need to have some sort of reach out. They need to have some sort of greeting. We don't script the greeting. You're free to, treat humans like human beings and give someone a greeting that feels natural and authentic to you, still in line with the company values. So there's not that big box store, hello, welcome to Cat and Cloud. It's great to see you today. How may I help you? You can have a little bit of autonomy in how you engage with your guests. That's fair. And, it seems like a small thing, but in our business, in our economy, which is essentially a connection economy, being able to build that personal connection and being able to show up to work with a little bit of yourself is a really cool thing. So at every level above the frontline level, you want to find the amount of empowerment that makes sense for each employee's competency or level of expertise or level of trust, or however you want to frame that. So if I was going to recap the question and my general answer, what are the top 3 things you would do to build culture at a company or organization? 1, start with the mission and values every time. Embed those mission and values in every decision, everything that you do. 2nd, develop a consistent feedback loop for your employees. Don't let a week go by where you're not giving feedback and touching base. Make it a part of your process. It'll become easy. It'll become fun. You'll see people come alive. You'll see people want to contribute. You'll see people crave feedback, and it's an amazing thing. And then 3rd, give your team members some form of empowerment that matches the level that they're at, and there's a million things that go into building company culture. But if I was going to say start somewhere, start there. Okay, question number 2. This one's from Josh. Sometimes I know names, sometimes I don't know names. So Josh says, How about the journey of a new employee? The onboarding process, that cool passport booklet, first day of training, and continuing training for employees. I think that is fascinating for business leaders trying to install a culture that encourages employees towards hospitality. Also, the challenges and limitations of the whole process. So this is directly connected to the first question, in that everything starts with that cultural framework. So one of the things that we've done since day one, and always will do, is that every new employee goes through orientation before they step on the floor. And the purpose of orientation is to help employees get familiar with the culture of the company, so they can learn and begin to understand the mission and the values and understand our why. Why do we exist? What are we hoping to do every time we step on the floor? How do we want to be of service to other people? And getting familiar with that culture does a couple things. One, it's just an essential part of our process. But two, it also leads to empowerment. When you've gone through several days of training, so you've got orientation, which is the base part of orientation, is essentially a one-day training. And then we put everybody through an intro to coffee class where they learn the basics of coffee processing. They get familiar with our menu of coffee. What is our coffee style? What is our coffee promise? And they're going through and tasting everything we make. Food, beverages. One of our locations has a full kitchen, so they're tasting all of the kitchen menu items as well. And, on a functional level, to be able to explain those offerings to a guest, you have to have tasted them. So that makes sense. But on a pure empowerment level, there's kind of nothing worse than showing up as a new employee, not going through any sort of orientation, not going through any formal training, and getting plopped on the schedule and getting plopped on the floor. And this has happened to me several times. And it always makes me feel super uncomfortable, because I believe most people want to do a good job. People don't want to go to their job and just throw 8 hours away. Like, people want to be of service. They don't want to be a lump. And when I have that feeling of being behind the counter, not trained, don't know any of the menu, don't know how to prep anything, but I just got thrown there because the owner decided, like, hey, you're hired, you're on the schedule, show up on Monday. Man, it feels super uncomfortable. It's not empowering at all. So aside from the strict training of it, you have this level of empowerment where the person behind the counter and the front line is exactly what it sounds like. They are the people who are greeting your guests. They're the people who are taking care of your store in a very hands-on way. Like, having those people feel empowered and comfortable. And yeah, there's a certain amount of practice everybody needs to get in, but they can have a conversation with a guest. They can answer a question about a coffee. They can feel proud of being there and knowing, like, hey, I know something, I can help you, which is exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you. One of the things that we did when we were opening the company was we were exploring different leadership development pathways. So Disney is legendary for its service and hospitality, and Disney runs a thing called the Disney Institute. It's their leadership training. So you can purchase their leadership training as, a part of the public, and it takes you through all of the things that they do that makes their business successful. Sidebar, one of the interesting things is when we were going to different modules of the Disney Institute, the class was about 60 to 70% people who didn't work for Disney, people like us who are starting their own company, or CEOs of bigger business who are trying to build their culture. And then about 30% of people who were already actively employed by Disney, who were just going through ongoing training as a booster course, already steeped in the culture, but going back through the Institute to stay sharp. So one of the stories that they told was the most basic level job at any of the Disney parks is, I can't remember the name of the position, but it's essentially the person that you see who has the broom and the dustpan and What it looks like is their functional job is to sweep up the park. They're picking up trash. They're just making sure everything's clean and tidy. So Bruce, who was our really incredible leader at the Disney Institute, was telling the story of their onboarding. And, basically they're onboarded over a period of weeks. And for 2 weeks and change, the things that they're learning are all about the company history, the company culture, what is the guest experience like, things that are adjacent but not directly connected to Disney. For example, if you're in Los Angeles going to theme parks, it's highly likely that you're going to other theme parks. So someone at Disney might ask you the question like, hey, when does Universal Studios open, or what's new is happening here or there? They're steeped in all of these things. They're deeply steeped in the culture of the company. And then for the last 2 or 3 days of their training, that's when they actually learn, okay, cool. So here's functionally how you're going to sweep the floors or maneuver through your schedule. And that just ties in to, it's directly aligned with the way we think about things, which is they're there to help the guest have the best experience possible. And they're willing to over-invest in what is seemingly a simple position, functionally sweeping the floor. But their real job is, I'm guiding guests, I'm answering questions, I'm helping people feel at home. So that's one of the things that orientation helps us do. We're setting everybody up for success, and the guests feel that. And just as a side note, anybody who's worked in the coffee industry knows this, it's already pretty uncomfortable. It sucks to be a new employee. It's pretty uncomfortable to be a new employee. It's really difficult sometimes to be a new employee in a cafe because the regulars are part of the fabric of the cafe, and you can't slide under the radar when you're new. Everybody knows it. Everybody who goes in there every day knows it. So if you can meet them with some form of empowerment, it's awesome. It's super awesome. So the Passport, we've talked about it before, but if you haven't heard us talk about it, the Passport is essentially a booklet that looks exactly like a, physical passport. And we did it up really nice. Weiser did a great job with it. And it is a tool that has training benchmarks for each position that we have on the floor. So we started with frontline, and then we're in the middle of, actually, we just finished creating the coordinator passport, but it's not implemented yet. The coordinator passport is basically the cafes are broken down into frontline coordinators and then team leader of the cafe. So the team leader is obviously the lead of the cafe, and the coordinator is the next highest position there. So in the Passport, I have one right in front of me. So I'm just going to crack it open here. So even on the orientation, starting with orientation, you've got all these bullet points. So under orientation, you got handbook and passport, history and traditions, mission and values, intro to coffee, tasting all drinks, coffee brewing on the Curtis Brewer, pastry and food tasting, intro to service, and a cafe tour. Each one of those is a module, and you go through that module with your coordinator or team leader. And as you go through them, you get signed off. And at the first level, orientation, everyone's getting signed off if they do it. You either do it or you don't. And then as you move through the specific skill sets, each one is tied towards a competency level. So concierge, you've got concierge station operations, menu expert, internal communication, so forth and so on. As you display expertise and your team leader coordinator feels like you're meeting the cultural standard for each of those things, you get signed off on those individual skills. So once you get a whole bank of skills signed off, you get a stamp. So you could be like, I got my concierge stamp today, feeling pretty good about myself. I know all my hospitality basics. I know how to troubleshoot the register. I know how to open and close. I can do my staging. I can do my food prep. I got it all. And then each stamp goes in tandem with a corresponding raise. So there is like a pay increase with each stamp. And aside from doubling as, a training tracker, the Passport's great for keeping the motivation and curiosity high, because everybody knows at any given time what skills they're able to level up on next. It's a strange thing to come to work and feel like, yeah, got it all figured out. No one's asking any more of me. Been coming here for a couple months. I think I got it down. I don't know what's next. And once nobody knows what's next and there's no guidance or directions, things inevitably get sloppy. So the Passport allows people to self-guide and is a great bridge between frontline employees and leadership. So, I mean, that's, Josh, that's the basic situation of that. I do want to say that the physical passport, creating the physical passport is probably the easiest part of implementing the whole situation. The backing material and the train the trainer and the SOPs and education that buffers that passport, that's the trickier part. That's where you really have to have a bead on everything. So you can see how it's a big old spider web, because each bullet point of the passport essentially corresponds with a deeper module. It also helped us, like when we were building the passport, we definitely had line items on the passport that we did not have modules for yet. So it's kind of a gut check for us. It's like, oh, okay, cool. We want this, we expect this, but we haven't created a framework that allows people to become experts in this. So we need to get our act together and create these things. You asked about challenges and limitations of the whole process. I mean, it's just a lot of work, and it's well worth it. And that's on every business owner or every leadership team to decide, at what level do I want to execute at? How much do I want to hold people accountable for? How deep do I want to go into delivering this promise, whatever it is? And the bigger the promise, the more awesome the return. Also, the more effort and energy has to go into it. And if you enjoy the work, that's not a problem. But depending on where you're at in your business owner journey, or you're just like, hey man, I just fucking want to make coffee, I don't want to think about all this other shit. Fair. But you're going to get what you give. So yeah, the limitation is having these things, putting them into practice in a clean and concise way, embedding them throughout the entire culture, because it's easy to create things. It's much harder to operationalize them and weave them into the fabric of the company. And you don't have to get super fancy. It just has to be really clear, and it has to be reflective of the mission and values. Last Q. Dang, this one's a good one. Dealing with staff being upset about a fellow employee being let go. Okay, so this ties directly back to what we've been talking about this whole episode. And there's a couple different ways to see work. One is, hey, we're a group of buds that come together to have a good time. And while that can seem fun, it's not necessarily productive, and it can lead to destructive cultures. And the second way to see work, the way we choose to see work, is, hey, we're enrolling in this journey. We work for a company that has a really clear promise, a really clear mission, a really clear set of values, and we are here to do this thing. This is what we're choosing to do. And everybody has different goals and seasons in life, and everybody's focus changes. And when we're talking about letting someone go, it's not because we don't like that person or we don't value them as an individual. It's just there's something about either their performance, the way they're acting, the way they're treating other people that is not in line with the company's mission and values. So again, it's not a personal situation. It's just a values alignment situation. Now, if you have a cultural vacuum where you don't have a strong sense of your mission and values, or maybe you have them, but you haven't figured out a way to operationalize them, to bring them alive in the day-to-day through the things like orientation and the passport and feedback that we've talked about. A lot of times what happens is at any given cafe, the person with the strongest personality will essentially set the tone for that culture. And when that happens, and you have this cult of personality, that person can essentially have more, influence than the business. And that can be a real problem, especially when that person inevitably needs to be let go because they're, doing things that are destructive or unhealthy. And we've had those situations, and those situations are hard. And those situations require us to sit down with the team and explain as clearly as possible why these decisions were made from a cultural perspective, and it's an opportunity to realign as a culture. So as we've gotten better and better about weaving that golden thread of why in with what we do day in and day out, those things happen less and less and less. But in the beginning, man, it used to happen, I don't want to say all the time, but it definitely happened. I mean, it's incredibly uncomfortable because as a business owner, you sort of feel like you're not in control of the thing that you're supposed to be shepherding through the world. And that is a unnerving feeling. And it's also, I mean, for me is like a little bit, I don't want to say embarrassing, but maybe embarrassing that I didn't do a good enough job building in that culture as I could have. And those are hard things to face, but if you can frame them not as a negative, but just as information. Okay, here's information. I've got this insane cult of personality happening. I got to let someone go. Everybody's pissed. See it more as an indicator of, okay, I've got work to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again, because I need to put our culture first and foremost and not this one person's whims and opinions first and foremost. It's like, cool. See it from that feedback loop perspective. You can kind of see the theme here, that is everything being tied back to this mission and values. I guess the other thing I want to say on, dealing with the employees being upset about it, it's like, take the time to talk through it with them. Use it as a opportunity for alignment on what we're doing. And you may have some sort of fallout. You may have a cult of personality that's embedded so deep that, half of your store is like, I'm going to leave. And that's going to suck. It's also good because those people weren't aligned with your mission and values in the first place. It's not going to be healthy to keep those people long term. So it's kind of one of those things that's similar to the feedback loop. It's the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. And the better you do about operationalizing your culture, the less those things are going to happen. This has been an incredible experience because right now in the roastery, it's almost dead quiet. And when I started, there was all kinds of stuff going on. So now I'm just completely aware of everything going on around me. It's always great talking to you guys. We've been doing this podcast for almost 10 years now, and it's gone through many different stages. And hearing that you listen it makes our day. So with whatever you do it with great intention, do it with great enthusiasm, great love. We're stoked. The energy pipes flowing both ways on this one.
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, let us know, or tell a friend. These are the types of connections that are the most important to us and that we seek to create every day. If there's something you heard and you want to know more about, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com or head to our website, catandcloud.com/podcast, and let us know. While you're on our site, check out everything we have to offer. Dive deep into one of our single origin coffees or pick up a little treat for yourself. We have something for everyone, so check it out. Also, find us in the usual places, YouTube, Instagram. We're always there sharing amazing things. All right, that's it. Thanks everyone for being awesome. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, Mark's the Kids' Choice champion. Yeah. Mark does it for the children like nobody else.